path to winning isn't easy. Tips for attacking surveillance film if you're the star in a long-term disability claim denial movie. Long-term disability claims are often denied because of video surveillance, but guess what? I often see the report of a video surveiller and the film, and what I find when I review the report and the film is that it doesn't match. That in fact, what they have created is a work of movie fiction. If your claim has been denied because of surveillance, you should contact a long-term disability claims attorney such as myself. Among the things I'm going to be doing is I'm going to ask for a complete copy of your disability carrier file, including the surveillance and the surveillance report. Now, when I sit down to look at this surveillance film and the report, I find that it's common for the investigator to ignore what's shown on the surveillance that supports your claim. They only report what might be favorable to the disability carrier. And of course, the disability claims adjuster rarely reviews the tape and relies on the summary. Worse yet, the disability carrier will have their nurse or the investigator summarize the surveillance, leaving out the pertinent parts, and then they'll give it to the insurance company's liar for hire peer review doctor, who relies on the summary. But it gets worse. The disability carrier's liar for hire doctor is then going to call up your doctor, and they're going to misrepresent what that surveillance depicts. They want to poison the well with you and your doctor. The goal is to convince your doctor that you're lying and that your doctor should agree with a liar for hire peer review doctor's opinion that you can work or can work in at least a sedentary capacity. Now, what do I do as a disability attorney? I watch the video and I make a record and summary of the physical activity documented, and I compare that with the surveillance activity log. Then I overlay that with what you've put on your activity of daily living form, because I'm looking for inconsistencies and consistencies. And I am also noting the things that are important that support your claim. And I am, in essence, then creating my own summary. If necessary, I take the surveillance and my summary to your treating physician, and I have them address what's seen in the videotape as compared to the misinformation and outright lies that they've been provided by the disability insurance company. I want your physician to comment on your activity level based on what you've reported to them, what they see in the surveillance film, and what your medical condition consists of. In other words, is what's depicted in this surveillance film inconsistent with your diagnosis, inconsistent with your symptoms, and inconsistent with the restrictions and limitations assigned? I also get an affidavit from you or your family about what you're doing and the difficulties you have on an ongoing basis. That might have been a good day, it might have been a bad day. You may have suffered as a result of what you did. And I'm going to ask that FCE provider, to look at the surveillance and have them comment about what they see in the film and whether or not that's inconsistent or consistent with the functional capacity evaluations. And then I also will, in the right cases, send all of this to my vocational evaluator. Now, that's an expert in the world of work. I want them to compare what's shown on the tape with what's commonly known as activities of daily living. So you might be caught on videotape going to the gas station and pumping gas, or you may be filmed going to the doctor's office, or you may be filmed running errands. I want the vocational evaluator to render an opinion that this activity does not translate into the ability to work. I mean, unless you're a dog walker and they've got a picture of you walking your dog, that may not be relevant. It may not be relevant if they have a picture of you in Publix or Home Depot shopping. Those are running errands. Now, if you do something that's way in excess of your restrictions and limitations, like lifting a 50-pound bag of dog food, that's a different matter. But what I want the vocational evaluator to do is to tie together your doctor's opinions about your restrictions and limitations as corroborated by a functional capacity evaluation, if needed, with the definition of disability. In other words, Does the activity depicted on this film have, is it the equivalent of work activity? And does it have any relationship to the material and substantial duties of your occupation if we're in the own occupation stage? Now, if we're in the any occupation stage, the definition of disability is normally an inability to do the material and substantial duties of any other occupation that you could do in view of your education, training, skills, and your restrictions and limitations. So I want that vocational evaluator to look at what's on that videotape and tell me whether or not that activity of daily living is consistent with the ability to sustain full-time sedentary employment. Now, you also need to remember that the question of this surveillance has to be taken on in an ERISA appeal. You have 180 days in which to file an appeal, and you can't wait until after a lawsuit is filed to try to attack the surveillance. Let me give you an example of why this is so important. This is a story of how asthma and diabetes disabled a family physician. And Hartford's wrongful claims denial based on this surveillance was slammed by the court. So let me set the stage. Dr. Vaughn was a family physician who became disabled because of chronic severe asthma, the cognitive side effects of the prednisone treatment for her asthma, and her brittle insulin-dependent diabetes. Hartford approved her claim because she was unable to perform one or more of the essential duties of her occupation. They, in fact, paid benefits for over 4 years. And in that 4-year period of time, her asthmatic condition progressed. She had increasing flares. She had diabetic neuropathy of her upper extremities. Now, we all know that disability carriers like Hartford are not in the business of paying benefits for the life of a claim. Hartford conducted a review of her claim and referred the claim to its Special Investigation Units, SIU, which had surveillance performed and did an in-person interview. If you are covered by Hartford, this is their classic MO that they use in every case. So beware. They got 77 minutes of video surveillance over 4 days. Dr. Vaughn performed yard work. She hiked. She pushed equipment around her yard. She drove. She got in and out of her vehicle without any observable distress, hesitation, or impairment. That's what the surveillance report said. So what did Hartford do? They said, gotcha, you're not disabled, and we're going to terminate your benefits. So, of course, Hartford did just that. She filed an appeal, which unfortunately was unsuccessful. And as a result, she ended up in federal court. And this is what happened in the case of Vaughn versus Hartford Life. It's an Oregon case. The judge was not impressed with his surveillance film and held that the denial was wrong since she was not experiencing a flare of her asthma symptoms on the day of the surveillance. And she was no more active than she told Hartford or her doctor. So it's really important that we are looking at the context of the video, what it showed, and what inconsistencies there might be in between what she may have said or you said and the medical reports about the person's functionality. So it's really the totality of the situation. But you need to understand it took a federal judge to reverse this wrongful denial. Wow, that's a lot of information that we've talked about today in terms of surveillance. And I hope you've learned a lot. And that's important because surveillance, as I said, is one of the disability carrier's number one denial tools, in addition to the activity of daily living forms. It's a 1-2 punch. And don't let your claim get knocked out. Wow. As I said, we've covered a lot, and I hope you have found this episode to be enjoyable and informative. If you like this podcast, consider liking our page, leaving a review, or sharing it with your friends and family. This podcast comes out weekly, so tune in next week for another insightful episode of Winning Isn't Easy.